We're going to talk today about Olivier Assayas. Is a French film director. The one that we're highlighting is a film called Clean.
This record is just a lazy, shoddy, average, pathetic little bunch of songs.
You think the minute that you get rid of me, everything will be fine, right?
Just leave me in peace.
I'm out of here. Let go of me, I'm his wife. Let go.
Are you okay? What's wrong?
He died. Were you there when he died?
No.
Did you buy this stuff?
He is, I would say, the leading force in French film today. His background is this, which is quite interesting. His father is Greek, Turkish, Jewish, who was living in Italy before the Second World War, escaped to Argentina, married a Protestant Hungarian woman. Olivier is a result of this mix. He's known for living very globally and making very global films. You can see why. So the father, the mother are in Argentina for the Second World War, returned to France at the end of the Second World War because he was a screenwriter and in the film business, and he found a place in France. He had changed his name to Assayas, which is quite a difficult name, to hide his Jewishness, obviously, in those years. So this little boy, Olivier, grew up in a filmmaking family in the outskirts of Paris, but surrounded by the business. He decided to be an artist. He was not going to be a filmmaker. And we'll listen to him.
I've always wanted to become a filmmaker, even though I had no idea what directing film was about, and I had no idea how to get there. It possibly has to do with the fact that my father, being a screenwriter, he had directed a couple of films also in South America, as it happens. Cinema was never completely alien. I mean, I loved movies, I loved watching movies, but I kind of had the notion that because my father was in movies were not like a world away, that it was not out of reach. But when I started really getting nearer to a point where I would have to make decisions, choices, I realized that I was doing summer jobs as a trainee on various old school type of movies. I realized that was not the way I wanted to approach cinema. That ultimately there was more that connected me to cinema through my painting than the odd jobs I would be doing thanks to my father, and I gradually discovered, thanks to my late friend Laurent Perrin, who had already started very young to shoot like Super 8 movies, that you could actually get hold of the tools and start shooting your own 16mm films. As amateurish as they may be, at least they taught you a few things about how to approach cinema. And so as much as I learned things, being a trainee on movies here and there. I think I learned what cinema was about, what art was about, what the movies I would be making were about. Making my own films my own way, and in a very naive way, because I never went to film school. I studied French literature. I studied painting at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, but never cinema.
His work is singular and it's very remarkable. The film Clean was a film that he wanted to do because his wife, Maggie Chung, who is a very famous Hong Kong actress, could we get more global than this? He had decided that he should write a film for her in which she could show her real self, rather than being that she's extremely beautiful, But he wanted to write a film that would show her whole character, which was difficult, intelligent, sometimes reckless. Therefore, came this script, Clean, about a woman living on the edge of rock society, not the first tier of rock people, but the ones who stay in motels in little towns. He centered it there. She was sort of on the edge of it. And the drug use that goes along usually with this lifestyle. This is the script that he wrote. Before the script was finished, the marriage was finished. So they went to film it just after they were divorced. But they are very civilized people, and apparently they remained friends forever, so that was not an issue in the filming. This was really, though, a gift to his ex-wife. The film went to the Cannes Film Festival, and she won the award for Best Actress, and she promptly left the film business. So Maggie Cheung is no longer making films. But this one really stands on its own as an incredibly intricate film, and it shows who Assayas really is. He's always interested in making films that show people leaving one part of their life, moving on to the next. He is of the opinion that none of us become adult until we can leave our parents behind. One of the really surprising aspects of this film is the appearance of Nick Nolte in it, and of Nick Nolte playing a singular part, which is, I feel, takes over the film. He plays the grandfather of the child, Maggie Cheung's son, who has taken the child with his wife into their home because this generation has had children and passed them on to the grandparents because they want to continue being adolescents, and there's no place in that world for a child. So this brings up this really interesting part of the film that Olivier wrote that I find fascinating, because it's a very contemporary subject that I think many people can relate to. Grandchildren who are brought up by the grandparents, skipping the generation. Nick Nolte, of all people, is playing this grandfather who is ethical, common sense, grounded, responsible, and presents the moral message in this film. So Nick Nolte is representing the generation of conformity, opposed to the generation that came after that. His performance is so subdued, it is remarkable. Although she received the award at Cannes for Best Actress, many people felt, and I agree, that Nolte was the really, really interesting character in the film. He's giving us a contrast of two generations. There's Maggie, who's in her late 30s, probably pushing 40, who is still finding herself. She has to reinvent herself. So the child is in custody of the conformist generation, believe it or not, Nick Nolte. This presents a really interesting contrast of two generations. Maggie is the generation that is now pushing 40. She's going to yet reinvent herself again. She has to. She's forced to. She's not, if you want to say, adult yet. And we're going to wonder at the end of the film, will she become adult or not? But when you have children, they have to be taken care of. And so we get to look at the generation that Nick Nolte represents. He's the grandfather. This is the much more conformist generation. They led their lives, they had their houses, they lead stable lives. And he has taken on the responsibility of raising this next generation. So it makes for a really, really interesting film. We see Maggie in Paris running around wildly, and then we see grandfather, Nick Nolte, in Canada doing his quiet thing, leading his responsible life. These two lives intersect in Paris, where he must present to her a reasonable, measured argument for the future of this child. And it becomes a mesmerizing balance between the two characters. Assayas has made a lot of great films. The Clouds of Sils Maria, Juliette Binoche, which was quite a recent film. And in that film, he clearly has said that he's monitoring there, again, somebody moving from in a generation. It's really the story. Many people were confused by it. I didn't find anything confusing. It's an aging actress, a very well-known actress, and it's just a look at how we age and how life overtakes us. There is a younger character, Kristen Stewart, who is the new muse, his new muse, because she's in all of his films now. And he just tried to portray, through film, showing, through the mountains, through the clouds, through all sorts of things, how one generation is not pushed, but moves on, and it's replaced by the next one, the Kristen Stewart character. She even disappears from this mountain and is out of the film, gone. It's a comment on the new generation coming. She's done all she can do with Juliette Binoche character, and she leaves. So if you want to rewatch Clouds of Sils Maria, if you've seen it before, it's well worth watching. It's really a great film. The other film that I want to be sure that you know about is Summer Hours. Summer Hours, Assayas made after the death of his own mother. And when you watch it, you will see that it is very autobiographical. It centers around a family of the siblings, the death of the mother, dividing up property, selling off the house. But underneath it, this is typical Assayas. There's very little anger, but you can see underneath it's all the unspoken in sibling family life and in general family life. And he presents it without being obvious, but you sense it all there. And his real question in the film Summer Hours, which is, I think, considered very classic now, is what is left when we die of all this stuff. It's a beautiful house with beautiful artworks in it, and there are children, and there's family life. But when the matriarch dies, what is left? And Assayas' answer is art. Maybe that's all that any of us can leave, because the houses get sold, and the children, particularly in this day and age, the global way we live, go off and live in different countries. And we see all that happening. And the only thing what he closes with is one piece of art in the museum. Is that what we leave? Is art what we leave when we leave the earth? It's quite profound, but really incredible. His newest film, Personal Shopper, is one that everybody will, I think, should see. Let's hear him talk about it.
For instance, when I'm Personal Shopper, it's pretty much, it was a bit slower than I would have liked, but still, it's, I was Personal Shopper is a movie that happened because I had been preparing a film in Canada, which was like supposed to be some kind of American-French film, and we prepared it for 2 months. I had been researching it, writing it, took me ages. We prepared it for 2 months, and the day before the shooting, we lost our financer, who was an American madman. I used to call him American Psycho. So all of a sudden, the movie was
free time.
I had free time. Yeah, I had free time. So I came back to Paris, and I just sat down, wrote Personal Shopper like very fast in 6 weeks or something, 6 weeks, and we instantly got it moving. We shot it in the fall.
Assayas is very verbal. he has a lot of, he doesn't seem to mind. I was going to say he has a lot of trouble raising money for films. Everybody does. But he is not about to make commercial films just to make money. So let's hear him talk about what is his philosophy? How do you do this? Remain an artist and make films and raise money for them. Let's hear him talk about it.
Okay, so I guess it's quite obvious that American cinema tends to be more commercial, and then still it seems that French cinema is more intellectual, as it seems you're talking about. How does that affect the way you seek producers or seek money for funding your films?
Well, you know, the issue is freedom, really. It's not to me. When I make movies, it's well, you know, again, it's based on my writing, on what inspires me at a specific moment, but in the hope that there will be a broad audience, right, to see it. I mean, you know, you whatever artwork you make, even the most experimental or the weirdest, you always have in the back of your mind the hope that there will be an audience who will be interested, who will follow you on that path. I mean, they never. But then it's the issue is, of course, is just not to compromise your vision. You know, it's the thing is that to be true to the way you see things, to the movies you want to make, to a specific way of making cinema, and in the trust that the audience will respect that and somehow will connect with what you are doing. It's not the other way around, meaning you don't make movies to adapt to what the audience is asking. So in that sense, I understand your question, because yes, of course, when you try to get your films financed, what the system expects from you is movies that will adapt to whatever the audience is expecting. But that was yesterday. The problem is when you're making movies and when you're making art movies, which can also be considered in a way or another as experimenting, you're trying to figure out what the audience will want tomorrow. What the cinema, the coming cinema, can be about, and in that sense you have certain responsibility, because you in terms of when you make independent films, it's really important just to try as much as you can to put to the best possible use the freedom you have. And to make it to make it to the best possible use involves trying things that have not been tried, and eventually open up doors for other filmmakers in the future. There has to be some risk involved, and in terms of the way you make films, again, it's all about. It's not about format. It's about freedom. I mean, in my experience, I've been lucky enough to be able to make movies that were tiny budgets, bigger budgets, but every single time I managed to create a situation of complete freedom. But it involves being creative in terms of production.
Clean was a movie in which he wanted the Nick Nolte character to say, people can change if they have to. They don't change unless they have to. But if they really have to, he wanted to say that they can change. And the film ends, we don't know. We don't know that this woman will change. But I think it's his most optimistic film. That's how he wanted to end it. So Assayas goes on and on. He's going to keep making these films. Well, I hope, and I am quite sure he is. You are not going to see his films in our big mega theaters. He's not interested in doing that at all. He's interested in examining life. He's one of the few art house directors that we really have left it. He just consistently is out there making them. Many people have asked me, how do you find these films? How do you choose them? This is an example. if you find a director who is interesting, you don't have to like every single thing in his film, but I see every film that Olivier Assayas makes, because there will always be something to learn. They'll always be well filmed. He's like all of the auteurs. He works with the same cameraman. He works with all the same people. And he will find an actress. And for the moment, it's Kristen Stewart. We'll see how long this goes. He is a great friend of Juliette Binoche. Take this, get all the films he's made, and I think it's just a terrific learning experience. When you watch Assayas' films, you are on a learning experience. And so you can take any of these films, all of them, bits of them, and it will be an interesting and learning experience. And I hope you'll take that with him. So, thank you very much for joining me for this class. This is a really important director we've talked about, a really singular, interesting film. And as always, we want you to subscribe to Brainy Classes, and we want you to click that little bell there that you have to do, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much.